Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. This week, I had the chance to speak with Keith Gambill. He's a middle school music and drama teacher, as well as the president of the Indiana State Teachers Association. He talked about what his experience has been as a teacher, especially during a pandemic, what the organization does to support public education in the state, and how people can get involved with the organization even if they do not have children in the school system. Keith, can you tell me a little bit about your experience being a teacher?
Certainly. I have been a public school teacher since 1987. I've worked for the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation as a middle school vocal music teacher and theater director. And through that process, I've also begun working with the association. And over time, I've just worked my way up through that process until I became president of the ISTA.
And you've been in education for a good deal. Can you talk a little bit about how it's changed from since you started teaching and to now currently, and then into the pandemic?
Sure. So when I first started teaching, I had a record player and records, which, vinyl's made a resurgence lately. But the ability now, for example, of music teachers to be able to pull just little snippets and things digitally and present those to students' ability to create music in so many different ways now, and their ability to access so much of world cultures because of their ability to get to the internet has really changed the work that we do. That's just in my classroom. It's certainly that case throughout. But over time, we've seen how the digital age has come into the work in the classroom. Students being able to connect with one another across states or to other countries, where in the past would have been a pen pal and would have been exclusively writing back and forth to one another. That still exists, but they also have the ability to see each other and see one another in real time. And that's so exciting for our students today. The change during the pandemic has really been difficult for everyone involved. While you can present material to students, you can see them online or see their eyes above their mask in the classroom, there is some of that loss of connection, just that human connection, which is so important and really draws students to coming back and digging deeper in some of their lessons, those connections with other students in the classroom, other adults in the building. Some of that has gotten lost through this, and we need to take time to recognize the needs of the whole child and everything that they're going through and experiencing in their life as well.
Mm-hmm. And then on top of the pandemic, on top of everything else that's happening culturally and across the nation, education has never been more difficult. And can you talk a little bit about some of the other challenges teachers are facing right now, outside of just the pandemic?
Sure. Well, that connection with students, students who don't log on a regular basis, and being able to connect and find that student has been difficult. For so many of our students, there's a human connection they make with school, and that's what keeps them coming back on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that connection that we rely on to help move that student forward. And that's been part of what we've struggled with, certainly during this pandemic. And it's one of those things that is so crucial to the work that we do and in building community. And so we have to find a way to recapture that, and we're going to have some building to do as we begin to move through the pandemic.
And then if people want to help support their teachers and help support the students in their schools, how can they support you to continue building this connectivity and rebuilding this experience past the pandemic?
For parents and family, especially of our younger students, read. Read with them, read to them, ask them to read to you and or read something and explain it to you. Reading is so crucial and fundamental to everything that we do, that just taking some time each day or evening to read with your child and have that time, the benefits are forever. And that's the strongest advice I can give to families right there. Next is connect with your child's school and say, hey, I just want to know how things are going and what are some little things we can do along the way to help out. And to be a partner in the learning process, but make sure it's not a partnership with the family and the teacher, but the student is a crucial part of that as well. And they need to see themselves as part of that and know that we're all going to work in this together.
And Keith, kind of transitioning into the Indiana State Teachers Association, can you talk a little bit about what the organization does and helps with that relationship?
Certainly. The Indiana State Teachers Association is a union of teachers and education support professionals. That would include our custodians, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, nurses, all of those additional resources in our schools. And we work together to advance public education in Indiana. And we do that through working to make sure that our schools are well funded, that we're able to bring in the absolute best and brightest to all of our schools, and that we work to make sure that we have everything in place that is needed for our students so that they can become real meaningful citizens once they finish their time in school.
And when it comes to what the ISTA does at during a legislative session, what does that look like?
So we will work with legislators on how we think funding should be done, what are regulations that maybe need to be in place or taken out of the mix, because we know sometimes regulations get in the way of doing great work. But it's also about making sure that we are educating our members about legislation that is being proposed, and to make sure that they are working with their local legislators about what that legislation will mean to the schools that they represent at the State House.
And when it comes to the Indiana taxpayers, why do they have to advocate to lawmakers to ensure that teachers have the resources, the support, and all of that to help educate our public school children?
Well, currently it is the legislature that is going to determine how our tax dollars are spent. And part of the work that we also do is making sure that the communities understand the impact of these laws that are put into place. And that means that we have to make sure that communities are expressing their concerns about legislation that they are enacting in one part of the state that will come back with harmful effect on their local community. And sometimes they're not drawing those connections together. And so it is vitally important that we are using our tax dollars in a way that is going to provide the absolute best public education for all of our students, regardless of their zip code.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets into the equity of making sure that kids receive education and it's treated fairly through all zip codes, correct?
Yeah, and it's been never more apparent than during this pandemic, when we had to shift quickly to online learning and remote instruction. Students' inability to connect to the internet, to have access to devices, to have that ability and that network around them to be successful, we really saw a vast difference for our students all across the state.
And if parents or community members want to learn more about what the Indiana State Teachers Association is doing and keep up on the legislation and what's happening in their communities, where can they learn more?
They can learn more about us at our website. That's ISTA-in.org, or find us on Facebook. And certainly could connect with their child's teacher or any of the education support professionals in their school to find out more. We have had a lot of work this legislative session with our local school districts, working alongside our associations in moving forward resolutions opposing some of the legislation that's been proposed this year that we recognize will be harmful to our students.
And people are able to find that by connecting with you and seeing how that will come back and impact their communities.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Can you talk little bit about the movement Red for Ed?
Yeah, the movement Red for Ed really has just been a way for us to galvanize around the issues of public education, and it's something that's kind of spread across the country. Different states may have different days in which they encourage their folks to wear red, but it is a movement to say our public schools are really in jeopardy of underfunding, having funds drained away from them to other entities, to recognize the needs of our schools and how that differs from one community to the next, and that we need to be bold in our thinking and work directly for our public schools and the students they serve.
And if I'm not in the teaching profession and I'm not a support, how can I become involved if I don't have children in school? How can I be involved in Red for Ed?
I would recommend that you connect with your local association as best that you can find, and see when are they working on having action days. So if for most of our schools, Wednesday is Red for Ed Day. And so you want to show your support to your folks by wearing red on that day and letting them know that you are supporting them. Showing up to third house meetings when legislators come back into their community to meet with their constituents, that you are there, you're finding other ed folks, and letting those legislators know when a teacher gets up to speak, you're not a teacher, you don't have a student in school, but you are a taxpayer, and you are supporting the cause for public education. And you're a huge advocate for us in making sure that those lawmakers know how important it is to the entire community.
Because this does impact the community not only on the taxpayer side, but also for future generations, correct?
Certainly. We want the best educated Hoosiers possible, and we want an environment that's going to have them stay in Indiana and want to be a part of the economy of Indiana, and really work to lift everyone up. And that's why it's so important to invest in our public schools. You know, we have about 92+% of all Hoosier families choose their public schools. And so it's important that we're doing right by them.
Mm-hmm. Keith, can you tell me a little bit about how the vaccination efforts on teachers is helping, or what the ISTA is feeling about that?
Educators are getting vaccinated in Indiana,
mm-hmm.
and we're happy about that. Thank you to our partners at Meyer for stepping up, not only with their pharmacies and their stores, but they're also doing some pop-up clinics in some of our communities where they don't have access to a Meyer. But that's important, and we're excited to see our educators getting vaccinated. We hope that that's going to mean that the last quarter of the school year gets a little bit more back to normal.
Excellent. And then as we start to wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add about being a teacher, about being with the Indiana State Teachers Association, or in general just Red for Ed?
First, I want to salute our educators for this past year. They have been amazing in creating something that just did not exist 1 year ago. They have done something that no other educators have ever done in the history of educating our children. And it's been tiring. It's been a lot of work, but they are to be commended in what they've done. We have to salute the students along the way. It's not been the same. And, you know, that ranges from the kindergartners who started during this all of the way up to the seniors who have, this has been the end of their time in school. And they've had to make so many changes and adjustments along the way. And so I want to salute them for all they've done. And to everyone, I would say, look to your local community teachers and see when they are organizing for Red for Ed, because they're doing that for the kids in your community, and get behind them and show them your support.
On a social media level, because we do have a lot of people who are very into social media, are there any like profile banners or anything like people can share their support digitally? How can people do that?
Yes, and so if you go into any of the social media platforms, you can find there's Red for Ed banners that can be attached to profile pictures. You can look through ISTA or Indiana State Teachers Association. Sometimes you have to write that all out. But also check with your local school districts. Sometimes they have some that are specific to your local, mm-hmm. and that may feel it may feel like you're more part of the community. And I know they would love seeing your support.
And one last question. If I'm a parent Is there anything else I can be doing right now to support my child's teacher directly? Is there anything I can be doing right now?
Yeah, I would connect with them, send them an email, say, hey, I want to be supportive. What's the best thing I can do for you and for my child right now? And just really work to build that partnership in all that they're doing. And we need to all be giving grace to one another. The assignments may take a little bit longer to be graded and returned. And likewise, I know sometimes it's harder for students if they're struggling with connectivity to get an assignment turned in. And so giving grace to one another, I think, goes a long way as well.
Excellent. Keith, thank you so much for your time.
Certainly. Happy to do it.
If you'd like to learn more about the Indiana State Teachers Association, you can visit ISTA.org and follow along on social media. To learn more or join the Red for Ed movement, you can visit investineducation.org. That's investineducation.org. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out at Metheny, that's EMETHENY at radio-1, that's ONE.com. Or you can hit me up on Twitter at Emily Does Video. Have a great week.
Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.